everybody, welcome back on board the Boise Bus on a beautifully sunny Thursday summer's night. It's that time again of the week, funnest time of the week when we get everybody on. We'll throw open the doors and we'll let you guys determine the conversation's path, because it's going to be your points and questions and your opinions that are going to help steer the bus. Now, since the last Thursday night forum, there's been 2 matches and Celtic have taken 1 point from those as the manager's mixed it up. He's experimented with the formula and he's brought in some fringe players with questionable results and performances. Now, unlike Celtic, we don't have such a problem on the bus, because when we mix up our lineup, it is always top quality, it's always full strength, and there's always a performance to be proud of put in. And there's no change tonight, because I'm joined with 3 very strong, very welcome faces. The first down the bottom underneath me there is a man that needs no introduction. He's the man in charge, is he? I don't know. He might not present, but he's certainly, when he talks, people listen. It's the judge, Mark Kearney. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing very well, Steve. What an introduction, mate. I thought you'd talk about Jono there, the king of the Boise Bus. I mean, straight after his win last night or Tuesday night, well deserved, mate. We're all rooting for you. Russell needs to take a his pitch, mate. Well done. I watched it. I think it was the day after. I wasn't sure who won, and I thought Jono's going to win this. The tough quiz, by the way. The goalkeeper one was pretty tough. So next season, hopefully, Boise gets a wee goal back, and it's 1 each. It'll be interesting to see how you carry on for that, John. It's a tough marker you've laid for next year, mate.
Well, aye, that's it, Mark. It was interesting. I've not been able to get the smile off my face really since Tuesday night. The football wasn't quite able to bring me back down to earth as of yet. Russell's been playing the Mickey Beale cards in the group chat since, I believe. He was playing the Mickey Beale card 21 the week before on Sudden Death, telling me he was going to win it. And I just decided the time was right to put him out of his misery. And I look forward to doing it all again next year.
Well, that's true. I must say, you kind of stole my thunder there a wee bit, Mark, but never be deterred, because this man is here. He's joining us. There should be, is there going to be, I don't know, a guard of honour for him, but he is our champion, and to that end, I think he deserves a special and a proper introduction. So, talking out of the bottom left corner, he is the current, reigning, defending, Boise Bus, sudden death, champion of the world, Jono, the monologue voice.
That was quite the introduction. Bloody hell, that was even better than mine usually on the Tuesday show. That bloody hell. Oh, I'm doing good. I'm feeling about 10 feet tall after that. I feel like I'm ready to go 12 rounds.
Listen, there's a title in the bag, but as we all know, there's one more still to go next week. Is it going to be a double, because it's the bragging rights title that's up for grabs? Are you going to get over the line there?
Well, there's every chance. Put it this way, I think there might be a few surprises in store on Tuesday. It's not one to be missed. Will Russell do the Guard of Honour? Will there be a trophy presentation? Who knows? But one thing is for sure, I will definitely be ringing my A-game, because I hate losing to that bastard anytime it comes around. So, regardless of whether the title's won or not, unlike Ange and his Celtic team, I definitely don't stop, and I'll be going for another win next week. You can bet your house on it.
Absolutely. And there is the man joining us last, but certainly by no means least, the man behind Sudden Death. He's the man in the engine room of the bus that keeps everything ticking over like clockwork, and he is, of course, the font of all knowledge and the quiz master. It is Phil McGinley. How are you, my friend? You good?
I am good, mate. Good. Happy to be on again for another good T.N.F, although some headlines usually have been great, but that's what we're here for. We're here to tackle them, go over some of the recent bad moments that we've had, because it's not been fun the last couple of games that we've watched with Celtic, but we're here to tackle that tonight.
Absolutely. Well, before we crack on, guys, we say get your questions, your opinions, whatever you want to talk about into the comments, and we'll get our way around to them. A few things to get out of the way first, and of course the most obvious is our wee bit of housekeeping, because you are watching live on YouTube, and if you haven't already, take 2 seconds, flip over, make sure you hit the bell icon and subscribe to us. That way, every time we do a new upload or there's new content, you'll get notified. If you like what we do and you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you're feeling a wee bit mental, you can even share it. And of course, if you want to be a Boise Bus member, you can do that. It's completely optional. It's $1.99, but all our content is the same as a Rangers transfer, which is $3.99. All it does is help keep the wheels on the road, and there's many out there, such as Mr. Scott Cameron there, Jim, another Jim Dome. We like our Jims on the bus here.
Indeed.
Patrick says $1.99. Costs nothing to be a Boise Bus follower. That just puts a wee bit of money in the coffers and helps us keep running it. If you want to check us out, we're also on other platforms. We're on Acast, we're on the EPL Index, and we're back on our usual places like Spotify as well. So wherever you want to listen to, there is many options. And we've got 2 sponsors. The first, it needs no introductions, piesports.com, long-term standing sponsor of the bus. If you want a tasty match day treat, get yourself over there, place an order, and use bus 1880 at your checkout. That'll get you a nice 12.5% off your order. You can't say any fairer than that. And of course, there is now our new sponsor, ED Pharmacy. So if you are fed up of being soft as shite when it's come time to put in a performance, and you're more of a Mikey Johnson than a hard man like Scott Brown, get yourself over at ED Pharmacy. Place your prescription order, and when those magic beans arrive, you can rest assured that the next time you need to perform, you are going to be very much more Scott Brown. You're going to be as dependable as clockwork and hard in the tackle. So, without further ado, that is us done. It's time to crack on. As you say, there's been 2 games since the last Thursday night forum. We saw a disappointing draw against St Mirren, where we looked bang average. You've heard their opinions on that. And then, of course, it was Hibs last night, and it was a capitulation, I believe. Jono would like to say that's your word. We fell apart as once again we rung the changes and went round it. There's much to chew over that. I did listen to the PMP and enjoyed it, and it maybe changed my take on some of it. But I just want to go around you guys and see, in the cold light of day, how are we feeling about it? As a guest and champion, I'll go straight to you, Jono. What's your thoughts off the back of the result there? Are you disappointed? Can you look at it with sort of a bit of perspective, or are you rightfully angry?
Well, I think for me, I was expecting a stronger team. First of all, I think I'd said that on Tuesday. I thought he was going to start, cranking up the notches to get himself ready for the Scottish Cup final, which isn't far away now whatsoever. And when I seen the lineup, it was a little bit surprising, particularly with Bain chucked back in there. I know obviously there's been a bit of clamour and a lot of more rumblings now about whether Joe Hart's going to be good enough going forward, but I didn't expect Postecoglou to actually change his goalkeeper in the build-up to the Scottish Cup final. So that was a bit of a curveball, and whilst it seems like he's not had the worst of games up until his absolute calamity at the end, I think the 2 goals that Hibs get towards the end of the game are just... the third one's ridiculously poor, and it seems to happen quite often when they go to Easter Road. I always think of bad goalkeeping mistakes at that ground. I don't know why. I think Artur Boric always springs to mind in that squiggler or whatever they called it years ago. But I mean, in terms of how I felt, I didn't feel overly disappointed or angry about it. I think because the fact the league is won, I think I look at these games as an opportunity to see where our players are at on the fringes. I think what we're finding is a lot of these players probably aren't going to be good enough if we were to suffer injuries, suspensions, etc. next season, and we had to run, for a number of games with a Burnaby at left back, and that would terrify me, to be brutally honest. I think Kobayashi's still got a lot to prove to win the fans over. He's not looked great whatsoever so far. So I think in terms of the fact these games are, dead rubbers, in the sense because the league's already won, I think it's a good opportunity to try and experiment and find out just what your fringe players are all about, because you don't want to be in a position where you go into next season and then you're facing the unknown when you have to put Kobayashi in because you've not played them in games that didn't really matter, to find out and get a judge for where he's at. And if he's getting a judge on players like him and others, then it might just be a case that Postecoglou will take stock of that going into the summer, and provided the board back him with the funds, which they should be doing because there's enough money there, then I would like to think that we'll go on and strengthen again. So for me, I kind of get the experimentation. I'm fairly relaxed about it because of the fact that the games themselves aren't really overly important in the grander scheme of the league title race. But at the same time, you do have to look at it and think, I do think it'll be quite important for us to get a win at the weekend, just so we're back on track going into the cup final. We start building a wee bit of momentum. Aye.
No, definitely. No, that you make some good points, and much too similar to was said last night, where there's this sort of balance act, is there not? Where, yep, it's we're Celtic supporters, as Terry says, you don't want to see somebody wearing your colours fall that way. No matter if the games mean something or they don't. But at the same time, there's value in playing guys in competitive matches because they wouldn't normally get that chance, and you can really assess them. With that kind of in mind, I'll ask yourself, Mark, there was something that sort of rang in the back of my mind that the guy said last night, which was, we're talking about this bedding in period where, previous season we get guys in like Maeda, and there was the whole, we should be lucky that they hit the ground running because we would expect them to get a bedding in. They didn't have that luxury, and they just did it for the off. So when we're talking about guys, we're looking at guys like we're looking at guys like Kobayashi. It seems to be, in my opinion, it seems to be more around about the Asian guys that this idea of bedding comes in. Do you think there's any truth or value in that? Or do you think there's certain guys, I would say personally, Haksabanovic, for example, Bernabe, that the adjustment should be a wee bit better for them? It should be easier a transition, and they just haven't quite, hit the ground running. They've come in having played a bit of football. And what's your thoughts? Do you think there's a bedding in? Do you think, are we overreacting to these guys, or are we perfectly within our rights to sort of cast judgment based on what we've seen?
No, I think the players who are good bed in faster than the players who are shite, and that's what's happened. The players who are shite haven't bed in because they've not got a bed to lie in because they're shite. I mean, my anger on the Celtic performances hasn't been because, okay, there's an obvious, as Bossy put it, there's a natural drop-off, and he's right, that is natural. My problem is the fact that players have dropped off. I understand that. Part of me understands how, yes, it's a long season, you've been fighting hard all season, and you're going to tail off a bit. That's totally natural. I think you'd have to be a hard ass to not appreciate that. Where my anger and my frustration is the fact that just the severe lack in quality in our squad. I mean, if we can't buy players at Celtic and pay them 10, 9, 12, 13 grand a week, and they're just not good enough to be on the park against teams like Hibs and St Mirren, there's something wrong there. I said the guys that have played half an hour or 40 minutes here, Kobayashi's probably got about 300 minutes under his belt. He's played a few games now. Mm-hmm. He's played 2 or 3, got dropped out, and I know that's hard today. Bernabe, I mean, he's the full season. Like, that guy's 2 most famous acts in the last 12 months has been headbutting an opponent in Argentina and drink driving. I mean, that's all he's done. That's the mass sum of that guy's 12 months, and I just think the guy needs to be put out of the country. Never mind put out of Celtic. To want to see that guy in a Celtic shirt again. I know people are overreacting on Twitter and that. And you know what? Perspective is we're probably going to win the treble. But I'll tell you something. See, momentum, isn't it a switch you go on and off? I think there's a huge element of luck for Celtic that we've played the hard teams already. Because if we were in, I know you would say, for talking sake, if we were still playing competitive matches, then maybe you would still see Cameron Carter-Vickers on the bench, in the squad. But we're just lucky that I think some of your bad games or your harder games are behind us, because if Ange makes the same excuses as some of the whoppers on Twitter make for this squad, right, then he will stick by these second string players. And then what happens next season if these injuries happen in October and not the end of the season? I wouldn't trust a Bernabe, a Kobayashi, an O. I said to my brothers yesterday, if his family knew thought he was a striker, that's why they call him O, because they wouldn't have called him Yes, because he's fucking shite. I don't care what anybody says. I know I'm judging the guy, but no, hang on a second, mate. We've got. Sorry, buddy, I'm not trying to get back.
No, listen, I just want to. I don't want to people down.
We're going to win a treble, right? Probably, without a doubt, we're going to be favourites, right? So perspective has to come into it. But I don't think that the Celtic fans at Easter Road last night get a wee voucher on their season book for next season for half price, because Celtic fans are not entitled to win matches, but they're entitled to watch a Celtic team the best available team on the park, or at least a team set out to win. That was a kick in the park for Ange yesterday, and my fear is that his arrogance about him, which he has got, we've all got it, but he's got it quite a lot, would tell me he'd play that team even tomorrow night, the exact same team. And the fact they never took my head off was a bit concerning, because everybody in their mall knew that guy was going to get sent off, and he didn't care. He was just waiting for it to happen. And I think his in-game management is awful, and I don't care who that upsets.
Well, see, you push back on a wee bit of what you're saying there, right? Obviously, you're impassioned, and that's what we want. We want strong opinions. We want that coming across. That's going to, not everybody has to agree. That's perfectly fine. You're saying stuff there about Ange and looking at guys and playing, and sticking by these guys and that. Now, some of his comments that he sort of came out where he's carrying the can for it. I suppose you can argue the toss that that's what managers do. They've got to do it, right? But we've seen a sort of ruthless enough side to him, over last season with certain guys, where that's Juranovic, where's Giacomakis, who, let's be honest, they were put out when they were performing relatively well. We also had guys like Rogic now who's been let go. So I understand what you're saying there, but there's nothing, as there, Phil, and at least I'd say, there's nothing to suggest that he isn't feeling the same frustrations that you are feeling, and he's looking at these guys and he's big enough and ugly enough to turn around and say, maybe I made a mistake here, maybe I dropped the ball. Are we being maybe a bit flippant, Phil? Do you think that kind of reaction to just say, they're shite, they're pish, they're not good enough, this is what we're going to be left with, is that presumptuous?
The thing is, this feels like one of these arguments that you can't win, and if you come along and say, it's not too bad, we've won the league, we're going to win the treble, there'll be fans that will jump on you and say, you should care about the performance, and vice versa. If you say that was terrible, people will say about that. So it's been a weird sort of 24 hours since then. In fact, after most of the results in the last few weeks, it's been a bit weird because you don't know what angle to take it. But in terms of the players, I saw a comment earlier on, I think David Kelly said it. What more can you learn about these guys? We've seen them some of them over the last couple of years have been with the club. They're a bit of dead wood now. Guys that he sees every day in training, the first team, it would have been maybe more fruitful to give guys like maybe Rocco Vata and that a run out, the guys that he doesn't see on the regular. That would be more where you would learn of what there's, what they can give us, because by all accounts, they should be the future of the club, shouldn't they? So they'll be looking more long term. But I mean, you put a list in, Steve, into the group chat last night when you were talking about the players, obviously, that if you woke up tomorrow and they were all sold, basically you wouldn't lose any sleep over it. And going over the list, when I read it, I was like, do you know what? You're pretty much right on all of them. When I read them all, I was like, I agree. But then when you look at it, you go, look how many players there are there that fit into that category. Kind of worries me a wee bit. You've also included the guys that were out on loan as well, which, let's be realistic, Sorrow, Mikey Johnston, Uragide. I mean, Ideguchi, I forgot he was out on loan. Yeah. He actually transferred. He's actually on loan. Isn't it? Aye, so it's like these guys are going to come back, guys like McCarthy and all that. So, and the thing is, realistically, are Celtic going to get rid of all these guys in the summer? No, you're not going to punt that many players. You'd have to have people who are willing to take them first and foremost. So it's not an easy process like we are playing Football Manager or Champ Manager for the old school. We just right-click on a player, offer to clubs, and you get inundated with messages in your inbox. It's nothing like that at all. Mm-hmm. It's a long process involving agents and so on. So that worries me that you put about 16 or 17 names there where you're like, we're quite the strength and depth that we talk about. We've got a high volume of players, but is the quality what we think? I think Mark's right when he says, what if we get to October, November, and we caught 3 or 4 bad injuries? Man, the summer recruitment has to be bang on with who's coming in, because I don't see that many players going out if that's what's there in the squad just now. Oh man, this last night was a bit of an eye opener again in terms of what they bring. Yeah.
I mean, well, I'll ask yourself, John. I'll see we're talking about. Let's single out some players. That's your gift. As he says, Mark's not held back. He's rightfully given his opinion. I agree with a large portions, everything he's saying. Some of the guys he's highlighted, I've had the exact same opinions on it. Yourself, who doesn't always get on these situations where you're able to give an opinion. I really want to hear about someone like yourself who's sitting there thinking, let's look at what we saw. We saw the Baniac come in out of nowhere. He just ran in. What the fuck's going on here? Do you know what I mean? And one thing I want to say just before I ask the question, I was glad his performance ended up the way it did, because dare I say it, he played well up until that. And see if he went through that game with a win, before you know it, he's the saviour, isn't he? The answer's already there. So it was maybe a blessing in disguise. But, you know, guys like Bain, we've spoken to the death. Guys like Bernabe, we've spoke about Yuki Kobayashi. But what about guys like Ralston, who have been, you know, rightfully applauded, and people have been really behind him, and he's, you know, he's a suitable deputy, he's this and that. Are we actually starting to see that, forget the guys that maybe aren't bedding in, some of the guys that we think have turned a corner, it's a flash in the pan?
Well, there is that possibility, as I say. I think when you're looking at these games, these are opportunities for, you know, the likes of, particularly, you know, if you're talking about Tony Ralston, there's a very good chance he might end up having to play the cup final if Johnson doesn't make it in time. Ralston's still got that position up for grabs there. It does look like Johnson is going to be back training. I think he started training this week, so I'd like to think he'll probably be fit. But Tony Ralston is playing for an opportunity, as were a few others, of playing in that Scottish Cup final. And he's not really seized his opportunities. And I like Ralston, but he's been nowhere near it as of late. I think when you're just looking at through the squad just now, I think it just does go to show there probably isn't enough depth there if we were to actually get ourselves into difficulties with injuries and suspensions. I just don't feel there's enough quality on the reserves to actually turn around and say we can be comfortable. And, you know, there's a good comparison there when you talk about and I think O's a bit raw. I think O might still come good, to be honest. I think there's enough there that I've seen of O to make me think he will come good over time. But at the same time, you know, if you were to offer me Giakoumakis or O, I would be having Giakoumakis at the minute. You know, if you said to me, you know, someone was going to have him to Kyogo and your options are either Giakoumakis or O, it's Giakoumakis every day of the week and twice on a Sunday. You know, but when it comes to somebody like O, I think he's going to take a bit more bedding in, and the drop-off there is quite considerable as far as I'm concerned between how good he is compared to how good Kyogo is. And it's not just the striker position. There's a few positions like that. You know, for goodness sake, I think if anything happens to Carter Vickers for us next season, I think he's absolutely pivotal for our team. I think he's been such a big loss the last few weeks. I think that's been part of the reason why we have been leaking so many goals. It's just because it's not just what he brings to the table in terms of his abilities, it's his influence on the rest of that back line that makes such a big difference. And again, none of our other centre-backs, for me, are anywhere close to the levels of Carter Vickers. Even Starfelt, I think, who's obviously the next best one, he isn't able to influence the back line in the same way. And that's what kind of I was hoping for on Tuesday when we were discussing it in the build-up, was we're hoping Starfelt could have, you know, guided a Kobayashi through that type of game. But by the same token, it might turn out that Kobayashi isn't going to be good enough. And even if he was playing an extended run with Carter Vickers, even Carter Vickers might not be able to help him through those types of games. So you're looking at it and you're kind of thinking, well, he's had these opportunities now over the last few weeks to see where his players are at. I think what he's found out in the last few weeks is that squad is going to need a bit of trimming. He's also going to need a bit more quality put in, because there is certain positions, no doubt about it. If you're looking at that Celtic team just now, if we got an injury to Kyogo, if we get an injury to Carter Vickers, somebody along those lines, even an injury to Greg Taylor, because I wouldn't be overly comfortable with Bernabe coming in for an extended run at left back, then we are in a seriously exposed position. And that will lead to drop points in the league. And it's going to be fine margins again in the league. As much as I've enjoyed poking fun at Rangers, their points tally this season has been pretty good, in fairness to them. It's just that Celtic have been outstanding up until the last couple of weeks in the league. It's why they've built up such a big gap. Most seasons this title race would still be ongoing with the points that Rangers had accrued. And if they do something similar again next year, then it's no doubt in my mind, Celtic don't strengthen, the title race would still be ongoing now. And, you know, you need to have a quality squad to get through that, particularly if we're wanting to make inroads in Europe, because ideally we want to be playing in Europe after Christmas, unlike this season, and we want to be trying to get further into those competitions, because I think that's what Postecoglou is wanting to achieve as well. And to do that, he needs to have a quality squad. And I think that is something we're finding out in these games, is that we don't have that just now, although we have the opportunity to correct it in the summer.
Yeah. No, trimming the fat, as you say, and getting rid of some of the deadwood, this is something that's going to be over and over. I'm seeing the comments coming through, and it's a real mixed bag, and this is what I love about these sort of situations that we find ourselves in. For everybody that's raging, there's enough folk that are saying overreaction. It is what it is. But as we always say, it's our gift. That's what fans do. It's perfectly within our rights. We're analysing players. We're not sitting saying the team are shite. We're not discrediting everything that they've done. We just want to be looking forward and thinking, are we tooled up? And, it'd be remiss if we didn't talk about these guys. I just want to sort of be short and snappy with this, but I'll ask yourself off, Mark. You saw the list. I sent it into the group chat, from top to bottom. We're talking guys, as you can see there: Barkas, Ajeti, Turnbull, Mikey Johnson, Welsh, Sorrow, Uragide, Shaw. The list is huge. Now, we've said this time and time again, we've got money in the bank and we've made all the right noises that it sounds like we're going to invest. But our squad is bloated right now, is it not? And yes, we want to get people in the door, but should we be making a focus first and foremost on those next couple of weeks, as soon as the season's finished, trying to tee up and get some of these guys out the door? Because I know people don't like it, but we look across the city. One thing that you can't criticise them about is they are very good at getting people off their books. Some guys have stolen a wage for long periods, but they're also very good at tearing up contracts. Now, do you think we're in a good position to get some of these guys away? Because let's just look at those first three there, or at least three of the first four. Barkas, Ajeti, McCarthy. Now, I'm no financier, but I would imagine that they're probably the bones of about 70 grand a week on our wages. And you look at guys that we've got in, that could be 3 quality players for us. 4 quality players, could it not? Or even 2 quality players. Should there be more of a focus initially on getting folk out the door, Mark?
Definitely. I think closer to maybe 30, 35 grand a week, mate, and quite honestly, I think you guys are probably on about 15, but that's just me splitting hairs. But I do think if we're getting rid of a lot of high earners of the club, I think we should be reinvesting that money back into the first team, Steve. I don't think we should be. I heard what a podcast this morning, the Celtic Exchange, brilliant podcast, and one of them mentioned, if we sell maybe 3 £15 million players, we might just buy a £10 million player this season. I thought to myself, really, we need to, you're suggesting we bring in 45 million before we spend 10. I thought that's where the club's got. Celtic fans just know, mate, where people are scared to try and spend money, and we've got to invest. I mean, the point is freeing up 8 grand a week on maybe, I don't know, a Turnbull, for talking sake, a 10 grand a week, and then no reinvesting it back into the squad, because it's money for all rope. If it's already money within the budget, then we should be using it wisely. I think we will have a big window that Phil said. It's going to be really important how we utilise the squad this season. We can't just keep the numbers. If these guys on the want to be sticking around to fight for a first team place, get rid of them. And if they're not good enough, try and find an avenue to get them at the club on loan or whatever. But I think this window is almost as key as what Ange's first window, Steve, because this will tell Ange and tell us what the board think the next move is. And if Ange doesn't like the move, then it's bye-bye. If the fans don't like the move and the board scurrying us all and Ange just puts up with it, then that's even more worrying than the last scenario, you know what I mean? And I'm not entirely sure. And I do agree with what he said last night on the live show. He said, like, we don't know what's going to happen, so we can't second guess it. But the thing is, that's what we do is second guess, and we do guess. We don't have the answers. In my opinion, Steve, will just answer your question quickly, is I really have real doubts that Celtic will strengthen the first 11 this season. I think we had the opportunity to do it last season, bearing in mind that we would assume last season that Rangers, who reached a European final, would strengthen. And Celtic still, in my opinion, stood still. I think the league just got worse and we just killed them off earlier. Mm-hmm. They will strengthen this season. That's up to them. I don't really care what they do. But in terms of Celtic, if we don't do it this season or the coming season, then I think we're all just safe in the opinion that it will never happen, because there'll be circa 80, 90 million pound in that bank that will be surplus money. Even if we don't spend that, then you can forget it, mate. You can forget it.
Yeah. No, just to finish off on this transfer thing, Phil, as I said there, talking about trying to write off guys. Now, some of the names that we can see, there's guys who maybe contracts will be expiring, guys maybe a year in the deal. I think out of those ones, we says, Barkas, McCarthy, they're probably the trickier ones to shift on, I'd imagine. I think, he's got roughly a year left on his deal. And then there's other guys that are going to be, let's be honest, low earners, your Shaws, your Irrigidis and stuff. See if you can't find a club or a suitor for some of these guys. Do you think there's value in, if it's coming to an agreement, not necessarily paying off the contract in full, or at least giving them a wage to just, put it lightly, fuck off? Would you rather Celtic spent, had it be, let's just say it was a couple of million to get these folk off the books, to thin the herd, and then, the thought being is if they're sort of lolling about, there's always this idea of, well, we've got players, they might not be in favour, we've got players. Do you think if you can get them away, it rolls the ball further down? Does it make that need to get folk in more urgent? Do you think? Do you think it's a good plan, strategy?
It sounds good in principle, but obviously when you're going to pay them off, literally you have to give them some kind of money settlement, and how much does that eat into our budget or prospective budget? We like to think that the club have, so that's a tough one for me. I mean, me personally, if I was in charge, which I'm not, obviously I would be looking to move them on. If we can't get a suitor, I would make that sacrifice. But I ain't on the board, I ain't the manager, and I'm not a financial expert. But ideally, though, yes, it would be. I imagine you'd have to free up some space. I know people talk about this European squad registration, and you need X amount of homegrown players, which I suppose are B team players. A few of them would fit into, but there's all sorts of different rules with that, where if you don't register enough, then you register a smaller squad essentially of like non-homegrown players stuff. So it affects the overall number you're allowed to register. Rather than like 25, you'd have to register a smaller number, which could be a problem if injuries and suspensions were to set in European games. So there's all these things as well that seem to come along that they need to take into account. But then again, when they look at refreshing the squad, do they start looking at more players that are based within Scotland? I know that we've said plenty of times on the bus. I know Russell's said this many times. He doesn't think Ange rates anybody in the Scottish Premiership. I know names like Kevin Nisbet and that always come up quite a lot in the live chat whenever this debate comes along, but I just don't know. I'd be more inclined to think Ange is along the lines of thinking of, I think he's really interested in any of the homegrown Scottish players within the league. So how do you solve that conundrum then? These are all like real loopholes or hurdles you'd have to get over and stuff as well when it comes to releasing players and that. So yeah, it's not as black and white as you would think. But ideally, yeah, it would be good to get some of this dead off, because when you look at the names you put in that list there was so many where I was just like, You're right. If they were to be gone tomorrow, would I lose any sleep over it? No, not at all, because I'm not bringing anything.
As I say, I think that the thinking there is let's just say you've got a guy that's on 2-year contract. He's out the picture. Nobody's going to touch him with a barge pole, right? Mm-hmm. And his contract over his period, if he stays and sees it out, it's maybe cost him, just pluck a number out of thin air, £2 million, right? Or you can give him $1 million to fuck off now. Is it short-term pain for long-term gain? Who knows? But listen, we're talking about manager getting money and changing and evolving squad, but let's address the elephant in the room. Jim C brings it up. We've all seen it. We're getting to the end of the season. It's going to be a funny season, isn't it? There's going to be the merry-go-round of managers down south, and this time it's Spurs. Jono, Spurs, it's a big name, is it not? Got a sexy-looking stadium. They've got plenty of money in principle, although they don't seem to spend it, considering against some of their cohorts down there. Are you worried about a Tottenham? Is that a kind of... We've obviously heard Regan. He seems to be a bit more clued up because he's not got any for punishment. He's a Spurs supporter as well. Does that worry you? Is Spurs a big enough club? Is it an attractive enough proposition?
I think so. I think it would be an interesting option for Ange Postecoglou if Spurs were to make an offer for him. They are a club that were consistently in the top 4 in England for a sustained period of time. They have dropped off a bit in recent times, and they're probably needing a bit of a rebuild, and that is what Postecoglou already has on his CV, having done it with us just a couple of years ago. So I could see why he'd be an attractive proposition to Tottenham Hotspur. Again, there's similarities with what, Postecoglou came into with Celtic, and the fact that Spurs notoriously don't like to spend money, and with Celtic fans would constantly say the same thing about our own club. I think it's a project that Postecoglou could possibly be interested in. So it is a bit concerning from that point of view. And of course, Regan did happen to mention as well when he was on earlier in the week about the connections with the City Group that Spurs now have, that could also lend a factor towards possibly an offer getting made for Postecoglou. However, when I look at it from a Spurs perspective, I just think it's unlikely they will make an offer for him at this time, purely because of the fact I think the Spurs fans will demand a bigger name, a more glamorous name. They don't look up to Scottish football and think, oh, that's a great place to go into the market, and even buy players or bring in managers from. Generally speaking, Spurs, when was the last time they actually signed a player or a manager directly? It was probably Alan Hutton. It would have been way back like 2008 or 2009. They signed from Rangers. But generally speaking, Spurs wouldn't look at that. They would want a Postecoglou or something to earn his stripes at like a Southampton or somebody at the lower end in England, either in the top end Championship, lower end Premiership, to actually prove his worth before they'd be willing to make the move. I think with Daniel Levy as well, the Spurs fans are desperate to get him out the door. So I do think from that perspective as well, bringing in somebody that they won't know much about probably wouldn't help Levy's case. I think Levy will then be shrewd enough to know he needs to go out and try and get as big a name as he possibly can. And that's what I would expect them to do. So I think because of the situation with Tottenham, I think we should be okay. I say with my fingers absolutely crossed. However, if Tottenham were to make a move for Postecoglou, do I think he'd stay? I think that'd be very, very up in the air as to whether or not he might look at that as a project that would be extremely appealing to him, because there's no doubt about it, Tottenham are a big club down in England, and once they are built up properly again, they're another team that can compete, in the Champions League and at the top end of the Premiership. So it's one to be wary of. But if you were asking me, do I think it will happen at this time and Spurs would approach a Postecoglou? I don't think so. I think there'd be more likely to be an approach from a mid-table English team that will try and take him to begin with.
Yeah, what about yourself, Mark? I know you don't care too much for the English game, but Spurs, as I say, are a big team down there. They don't spend a lot of money, as we say, but also if you look at, I know it's apples and oranges, but they're nowhere near the Champions League. It's not going to be happening for them getting into next season. Celtic automatic qualification. The manager's obviously said a few times about how he wants to give a better account of ourselves the second time round. Is that and that alone, do you think the project with Celtic is very much, in its middle stages, where you think that's enough to keep him there? Or do you think, is he likely to go to a Tottenham and want to build them up? But, again, they don't spend a lot of money, and projects aren't really a thing in England, are they?
Well, they came to Celtic with fucking Gavin Strachan and Steve McManus. Check you when he take the Spurs job. Playing it in the Premier League with a £200 million training facility, whatever it is I've got. He would go in a second. Jono's right. I mean, I don't think they would offer him the job, but see if they did, the money would be like £5-6 million a year. I think he's going to say no to that because he's got a project, because he wants to see Cal McGregor reach the last 16 in the Europa League. Come on, let's behave ourselves here. You know what I mean? And do something. I wonder if the Yokohama F Marinos fans were surprised the day he left to go to Celtic. Of course, they weren't expecting him to go. I'm sure they didn't wake up the day before they got offered the Celtic job and say, I'm not going to plan for the next match. They plan accordingly. If something comes up, like they go. You know what I mean? I don't think he knocked back that job. I know people say it's not appealing, but was the Celtic job appealing? I mean, the Celtic job at that time was...
Yeah, no, that's true.
Gavin Stratton took over for like a car crash this season. There was a major rebuild. Would working with some really good players in England tantalise your taste buds? And as I say, if you get a 2-year contract, 3-year contract, minimum he's got to walk away with maybe 15, 20 million pounds. His wife's got to tell him to sign that contract in a minute, and he's a man with a family. What guys in Bears Den and Pollock think about him for doing it won't matter to the guy one bit. You know what I mean? He'll be away for these shores long before he cares what anybody thinks about him doing here. Yeah. I'm going to get a different spin on the matter. If you indulge me, I think Celtic managers have got a shelf life. Me and Boyce have spoken about it before, and I think we're in agreement that managers have got a cycle, and I think he's getting into his last season at Celtic anyway. I really do. I think his third season might be his last. It's only a feeling I've got. And you know something? A few years ago, I decided I'm not going to start crying when guys come and go at the club. If he went, I would wish him well. I wouldn't start greeting about it. My worry would be who would replace him with. But he didn't invent Celtic. He didn't invent football, and he didn't invent me watching football. So if he went, I wouldn't be greeting about it. I would just be worried about whose replacement would be.
Yeah.
But Jono, word for word, the guy's spot on. If he gets offered the job, which he won't, he'd be away in a New York minute. And don't think he wouldn't.
Phil, see to spin it then. Let's just say he does go. London's calling and he wants a piece of that action, right? So we've spoken about this before. Ange buys a lot of guys from markets that he knows. So a lot of Asian influence there. And he buys guys that specifically play to a system that he set up. I mentioned this before. Let's say he leaves. Where does that leave us? Are you concerned? We love Matt. We love the man. We love what he's doing. Long may it continue. But I've always had at the back of my mind that we sort of thinking of, right, we are very specific to one man's needs and one man's wants. What happens if he leaves? How do you feel about that? You know, are we up the creek without a paddle? Are we in Shutsville? If we get a bunch of players that react to one man's style, one man's philosophy, do you see enough flexibility in what we've got? Are we buying? Is Celtic his plaything?
I'm not worried about the players because good players can play in any system. They can adapt. I'm worried about what the club would do in the succession planning because we've been down that road before. So in a
there's a big ginger coloured button.
No, there's a white coat. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen, and Phil can jump in. There'll be a video in the dressing room doors flying open. There'll be a white coat hanging on the hanger, and it'll say above it, Alonso. That's what it'll be. That's what it'll do. And it'll be. Remember the video?
Oh my word!
Listen, if he left, Ange already set it up last week. He called John Kennedy "quote unquote" outstanding, and then Celtic put him out for a presser the same day. That's your succession plan. Sorry, Phil. On you go, mate.
No, that's I was solid on. I'm worried about what the succession plan would be because I do think the players, if they're good enough, they can adapt to him. But we would have to have a very particular type of manager come in to pick up the reins, and you can't just pull in somebody in a matter like if Ange gave us like a couple of days essentially, and then he was off ski. You would need to take a good few weeks, and I don't know if I trust this board.
Brendan Rodgers, Phil. Brendan Rodgers for another turn because that could be quite the story of happening in the summer.
Happy days. I'd take that in a second. I swap it to new.
I do love the Brendan Rodgers era, but again, I don't think that's going to happen. For what it's worth, though, I agree with the boys. I don't think Spurs will offer him the job. I don't think Daniel Levy's in a position to take that type of risk because, the fans have been very vocal down there with chants of Levy out. Apparently, Regan informed us that at the weekend they had to drown out the chants aimed at him with the music being turned up to 11 essentially to drown it out. I don't think he can turn around and say to the Spurs fans after having like Conte and Mourinho and so on that we're going to appoint the Celtic manager because if it goes wrong and he's got to sack him after a couple of months, which Daniel Levy does a lot, sacking managers, it's just not going to work well for him. He's going to need a box office name to get their fans back on side. And as much as we love Ange and we know how good he is, the Spurs fans are not going to take well. So Daniel Levy's got to appoint a big name that they will take to. So for what it's worth, I don't think he will. But if in the worst case scenario it did happen, I would be worried about the next steps because I don't know what this board would do next. I don't even want to even think about it. it scares me that much.
Can I say one thing about just one thing? I think Dermot Desmond has got involved at Celtic only a couple of times in terms of appointing managers. He's got a good record. I think he hired Martin O'Neill. I think we all know that, and I think he hired Brendan Rodgers. So you probably think that he's been key to that relationship, right? And he's backed him as his man. And then the two guys, when it really mattered, didn't get the funding that the fans thought they deserved. A guy who got to the European final and a guy who was ready to take us to the next level. I wonder on that same premise, what makes us think that Ange is going to be the man who Dermot Desmond didn't back 100% in terms of, we all know Dermot Desmond was the man who backed it. It was a guy who hired the two. I don't know what makes us think that Dermot Desmond is going to now push the button on this guy when he didn't push a button on two guys who he's been very hands-on with. So it's a wee something. I hope these are all people who are telling me to calm down is right, because I'd rather Celtic were successful. And
yeah, well, listen, let's temper some of the concerns, right? You know, as we says, you know, we're Celtic podcast. We love this club. We want to see everybody do well and be successful. And I can see there's a wee bit of unrest. You know, some folk don't like talking about the difficult things. They don't want to address what might happen. It's what it is. Do you know what I mean? It's topical. It's in the news at the moment. That's what we're going to talk about it, because we want to talk about current affairs. But listen, let's look towards something a wee bit more positive, because there's a trophy to be handed out at the weekend. It's going to be at home. It's going to be against Aberdeen. It's going to be the second trophy we're going to officially get our hands on and put back in its home. And then obviously a week over, there's potential a treble, which will be a nice way to round it off. The positive vibes have surely got to be all this sort of, you know, rut that we've been in with some of these results lately, the news about manager changing and all that kind of thing. You know, we have something tangible to look forward to the weekend. Two of you guys are going to be there. You've surely got to be up for that. Are you expecting, we certainly, you know, we've said this, we've got to surely, we are owed one, are we not? The fans are owed a proper performance. The fans are owed a first team, the best players on the pitch, and a true to form. This we don't stop. You know, let's finish on a high. I've been to games where we've handed out a trophy and we've not got a result, and it's strange and it's peculiar. We're not going to be seeing that at the weekend, are we, guys? Jono, you know, are you full of the beans? Can we put everything behind us and look towards the weekend with a bit of vigour and a bit of joy?
A bit of optimism, yeah. No, I think so. I think so. I think there is definitely more levels in the Celtic team. I think they're actually going to benefit a lot from the fixture as well, because they're playing an Aberdeen team that are now guaranteed to finish third and will no doubt have been out partying the last couple of nights, I would have thought, to celebrate that achievement over at Pittodrie. So I wouldn't be overly surprised if Aberdeen aren't going to be taking the game at the weekend particularly seriously. Whereas I think for Celtic, it's an important one to win, not just because it's trophy day and, you know, we need to end this sequence of poor results, because really since the split, if you were to look at our results, it's more like relegation form than really the form of champions. And when you really break it down, it's been, what is that? You know, 2 defeats, a draw and a win from those 4 games. So it's not exactly the best return of points. Granted, as I say, the league was already done and dusted. But, you know, going into the cup final, I think it's massively important for Celtic to get themselves back to winning ways, just to get themselves back into that groove and break that rut. I fully expect them want to put on a show for the fans. They tend to want to do that on Trophy Day, I think, especially after the last few weeks, because we know already what the questions and everything else is going to be from the media this week. There's always going to be these sort of niggling comments about how, Celtic didn't really turn up the last couple of weeks, and they almost try and slant it in a way as if, you know, the title that Celtic have won was actually a lot more of a closer run thing than it actually turned out to be, just because the points gap is closed when the race is already over. So I think all of those factors play into it, but I can't see anything other than a Celtic win. And I do think they'll benefit from playing Aberdeen, because they've all got nothing left to play for. And I would like to think Celtic can go out on a high and win by a few goals. And I know that's a bit contrary to recent performances that we've put in, But I just think on Trophy Day, there's something special about that day. And, Postecoglou and the players will be able to get themselves more mentally up for it than perhaps they have been in the last couple of weeks.
Like, so that's the kind of positivity I want. You'll be there with your old man, Phil. What's your hopes and that? Because it's hopes and aspirations, isn't it? How sad is it that after a couple of snidey results, we're wanting something to send us home happy?
Yeah, I think so. I think we'll play the strongest team. It'll probably be as close to the cup final team as it can be. I mean, Johnston might make it back for the cup final, so he's training with aspirations to make it. But I think you're looking at pretty much what he's going to field for the final. And I think we'll finish on a high. I think we'll go and put a half-decent performance in. I think we'll get a few goals in there as well. And I think with Aberdeen now I believe they've now secured European football up to Christmas, guaranteed. Because it'll be
£5 million in the coffers.
Same thing that Hearts had last season. So it's good for them and good for the coefficient. So I think we will finish on a high. And then, it needs to be tomorrow. This game isn't a time to keep this experiment going, to trying a few of the Fringe players. I think he now knows who he can trust for this final and who he can't. And I think he'll field a team that will pretty much mirror what we'll see on June the 3rd. And I think they'll get it done on Saturday. We'll finish on a nice high to end the league season.
Yeah, the experiment's got to stop, isn't it? But I'll ask you something, Mark, because a name that's been mentioned as we go into the weekend, he was on the bench. Stephen Welsh, is it going to be an outing for the Coatbridge Ferdinand? Is he going to get a wee shot before a potential outing against Cali Thistle?
I think he deserves a shot, mate. I've said before, I think he's rotten, because he is rotten. But I would give him a game before I give Kobayashi a game, or I'd bring Awata in. And I heard Awata played so many games in Japan in central defence and played well. That league must be absolute shite, because he was rotten in defence and he got ragdolled about. I actually think the goal that we lost, Ralston tried to pass the ball back to him as a wee kind of half volley. He had a better view than me, Phil, but when he was trying to volley the ball back to Awata took a step back. So Ralston was in the middle of taking a touch or playing a pass, and he flustered himself and made an absolute arse of it. I think there's a mixture of two daddies making a pair of tits. And I don't really know where the team lines go on Saturday. Part of me thinks he's got to double down and play Kobayashi and Bernabei again just to prove a point. We all know he's capable of doing that and keep his best players for the final. But as I said, I think I wouldn't put it past him. But as John just said there, it put me in mind of something like it's when you see like a 100-metre race and the sprinting's finished and the winner just slows down after the ribbon's been cut open and the players just catch him up. And that's what it's like. I can imagine the press using that as a way. That's why I didn't want us to drop the ball a bit. I wanted us just to, if and extend that points gap, just to prove, because we know the way in the press in this country just can't wait to find some wee modicum of anything they can use to say Rangers are good. I don't think the gap's as much as 13 points. I think Rangers are pretty. I agree with John again. I think the Rangers are a pretty good team. We're just better. They can't help the fact that we're better. I mean, we'll be phenomenal this season until we win the league. Then we just, but on Saturday's match, I'm actually relieved a wee bit that Aberdeen did get the points last night, because I think if they had to win the game on Saturday or at least get a draw, I don't think we would have won the match. I said to my dad after the Rangers beat us, I said that we won't win a match the rest of the season. I said, Dad, we don't win another match, and I stand by that. But the Aberdeen winning last night, I think that we might just get a victory. I don't think it's going to be a scoosh. I don't think you just press a button and make Cal McGregor play an 8 out of 10 again, or press a button and make the rest of the players perform. I don't think it's as simple as that in football. I think that Ange will want to prove a point to the fans that this is we're the real champions, but I think another part of them on the other shoulder will be saying, fuck it, let's just double down on this one. But we'll see how Celtic will win now that Aberdeen have won their third place. But I think Celtic will win more so because Aberdeen's situation has changed, because you can't just turn it on and off in football. It's not as easy as that. And one more thing, very quickly, I think when the team news came out last night, the automatic default position was all us saying, well, the league's over. And that just proved one thing to me. The minute we saw the team lines, we knew that the rationale had to be made for that team. Instead of just talking about the team selection and how it fits, we decided to make excuses for it, and that's when the Celtic fans knew that team wasn't good enough to win last night. And for me, that's concerning that a Celtic team of any nature isn't good enough to win in Scotland, because I genuinely believe this is the worst Scottish Premier League I've ever seen. And if we can't get second string players win 10 grand a week to win, I don't know where we go with these second string.
Well, there it is.
We're champions.
Jono, I want to come to yourself finally. You're a man that knows a bit about having bragging rights, and you know about controlling the narrative off the back of your historic win. So as we go into this weekend, we've heard a lot of noise. We've had a lot to chew over. There's been mixed reactions with fans, and there's been a lot of positivity across there. The one thing that's going to matter is the pictures that we'll get on those Sunday supplements, isn't it? It's going to be Celtic champions again, back to back. Trophies don't lie, do they?
No.
Is the narrative, are we getting out of that wee window now? Are we going to now that it's unavoidable? Result, no matter what way it goes, we're hoping for a win. When the papers drop on a Sunday, is this it? Is the narrative back in our hands? It always was, but it sometimes gets muddled.
Well, I think when you see the pictures and everything else, and yes, you do get that moment where it's crystal clear who the best team has been over the course of the league season, when you're going to see Callum McGregor holding the league title above his head at Celtic Park at the weekend. There's no getting away from that, absolutely not. But when you're talking about the media, it will be a very fleeting moment in time. I would suggest that they will actually have that narrative as if Celtic are the strongest team. You'll get the next day, I would suggest, and then all of a sudden the narrative will change into all sorts of doom and gloom, I suspect, ahead of the Scottish Cup final. And let's just say I wouldn't be surprised if there's a few more rumours of Postecoglou to Spurs or whoever else may be looking for a manager that week hotting up, because that is what the media in Scotland love to do, as far as I'm concerned, whenever Celtic have, a big game on the horizon. So yes, in terms of getting the trophy, the media have to pay tribute to that. But I mean, if we're looking at that lasting for very much longer than a day or two, I would be very much surprised based on previous experience. However, there is no doubt about it. When we get our hands on the trophy, we can once again say we're champions. And that's really been the message Postecoglou has been trying to get across to the media at his press conferences over the last couple of games. And when they keep trying to question him and trying to put him under pressure for the fact the team has been underperforming, Postecoglou does remind them that the race was over weeks ago and Celtic have already won the race. Rangers can run and run as much as they want, but it's too late. The champions have already crossed the finishing line, and they're playing just for the sake of playing now. So, yeah, I think when we're looking at it, all said and done, we'll get the trophy. They'll no doubt win the summer hype job like they always do.
Absolutely. That's the... Listen, guys, just want to quickly run round you all. I know we're in strange times at the moment. We can't really predict a result. But I am staying fully positive. There's a trophy there. The sun's going to be splitting the trees. It's going to be a joyous Saturday, I'm hoping. And I'm predicting a result to go with it. I think we're going to get something a wee bit closer to what we expect. I'm going to go for 2-0 Celtic. And I'm going to go with a returning Kyogo getting an opening goal. That's my thoughts on it. What about you guys? Phil, you'll be there in attendance with the old man. You'll bought all the merchandise. You'll have the Champions t-shirt on. You'll have the foam finger. You'll have the whole shooting match. Talk to me. What are you thinking? How's your day going to go?
I'm going to be overly positive. I was overly positive last week on the T.N.F, and I was completely wrong with that one. I said 5-0 last week. I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to say another resounding 5-0 victory. So I'm going to get it right eventually. We beat Motherwell 5-0 on the last day of last season, so I'll say we'll replicate that. We'll trash Aberdeen 5-0. The pressure.
You throw enough shit at the wall, eventually something will stick, Phil.
I said 5-0 last week against St Mirren. I was miles off, so I'll say 5-0 again tomorrow. Come on.
Right, yourself, Mark. Come on. Surely you must be feeling the positivity of a trophy lift.
No.
Oh, fuck.
No, of course I won't. Listen, see the end of the day, I heard Tony for Tim saying See when we lift the trophy on Saturday, be happy Hibs won't matter, and that's a fact. They're going to win the league on Saturday, and we're going to lift that trophy, and everybody else in Scottish football is going to be sick by it. And I hope they get a good view of it. I'll tell you that for nothing. No, I think Celtic will win on Saturday. I think we need 2 goals to beat the goal scoring record. Is that right, Phil?
I think the goal scoring record.
Check that.
Is that still on?
I thought Kyogo said 4 more goals and we get 2 there, did they? Well, I think we'll get it. I Celtic will win 3-1. I think that mob will score just because of the defence, but I think we might get 2 or 3 goals. I think we might give the fans a proper nice.
That's what I like to hear, a positive judge. And finally, to our very own champion, a man who knows how to get results and get over the line. Mr. Monologue, talk to me. The positivity must be running through you.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be a very positive, productive day at Celtic Park. I think both teams will score. I think it'll be a really good game of football, to be honest with you. I think, both teams can play with a bit of the shackles off. It should be a good game. I always think at Celtic Park, if the sun is shining, Celtic tend to be on a show. I don't know why. I always find when it's sunny at Celtic Park, we tend to play usually quite well. I always associate that with big wins for Celtic. I'm going to say Celtic will win. I think Celtic will score 4. I think Aberdeen might get a couple. I'm going to say 4-2 to Celtic. I'm going to say a reversal of the scoreline midweek. Yes, as we address that wrong and also start building towards the treble.
Lovely. Well, guys, listen, thank you for joining me for another wee chat about our favourite team, and everybody else for getting involved in the comments there and putting across your points and opinion. You guys are ultimately the reason that we do this, and without yourselves, this would all be fucking pointless. So whatever you're doing at the weekend, make sure you're enjoying it. Remember, Saturday's coming. Doesn't matter. It's just a game. It was over ages ago. We are the champions. We shall not be moved. We will not be moved. And make sure you, as much as we hate the rag tops, buy all those Sunday supplements and slide them into your colleague who's a Rangers supporters, pigeonhole at work or whatever it is, and remind them why we are champions, because it should be a good day at the weekend. We should be celebrating. And listen, a week over, it's going to be an extra celebration. Whatever you do at the weekend, however you celebrate, take care of yourself, stay safe, and enjoy it. Good night, everybody. Catch you again next week.